Okay, it looks like we have some viewers on now. Just let me know if the audio is coming across well. But today, so obviously, as like my last stream that I'm doing in these monthly streams, I'm going to end off with questions submitted over the course of the month, starting prioritizing super chats or supers and or members first, and then I will go into everyone else in reverse chronological order. But before I get into that, we're going to touch on the Liberal debate while we're waiting for people to come in and wait for people to ask questions and all that kind of things. So this is referring to the Liberal English debate that was on the 25th, not the French ones. My French is not good enough to really capture the nuances of a debate in French because language is important. But just as a reminder, everybody, this is the rubric I use for grading these debates. This is not grading debates off of politics. I'm just doing it off of the skill of the debater, their ability to stay on message, moments, landing blows, oration, etc. So the scores I'm giving have no bearing onto how I would actually vote if I was going to vote in this Liberal leadership race. This is entirely and exclusively how good they are at debating. And as a compromise, because the last time I did this I didn't play any clips, I'm not going to play a lot of clips, but I'm going to play some illustrative clips of what things I'm going to talk about. So they're going to be short and sweet, but just to like capture what I'm going for here, just so it's a little more clear. A little less. Make my point here. So, no further ado, we're going to hit off with the first Liberal leadership contestant here. And of course, the CBC... Oh, wait, that's the wrong video. This is for Gould. This is... So, actually, I will go back to this real quick. So, this is how I'm grading Gould. So, she stayed on message throughout the entire debate. So, she has achieved a C on that regard. She has no moments. Nothing is memorable about her performance. So, she gets a C on moments as well. She has a lot of good blows, though. So she's actually all the way up here in the A tier when it comes to landing good hits. And I'm going to play off the hits here just so you can kind of see what I mean. And I would give her a B when it comes to oration. She's not doing all the extras that I would want for an A. There's no flower. There's no like very deep interest, but she comes across really well. She's very articulate, and she manages to capture very clearly the emotion she's going for, which is always good in your oration. But let's play some clips here so you can see what I mean by attacks. So this is the first attack. I hope the audio plays well. So this happens at like 18 minutes and a bit into the debate. And here, she is attacking Mark Carney. Just one second here, I have to get my audio set up on the back end. I'm not the smoothest at this so far. Yeah, let us play it.
Ms. Gould. Thank you. Well, one thing that I would like to ask Mr. Carney, because yesterday he made some mentions of sectors that he would protect over others. And I think what is really important is to understand which sectors you're willing to protect, but which sectors you would negotiate away. And that is something that I think as Canadians we need to understand, because as Prime Minister, I'm not going to negotiate any of those sectors away. I'm going to stand up for people in every single province and territory, every single sector, to make sure that we protect Canadian jobs and protect our industries.
Okay.
So what makes this actually a pretty good attack is I'm going to show some attacks later on that are not actually very good. But this is a good attack because it actually hits on policy grounds. It hits on very specific grounds for Carney. And it proposes a big challenge. I'm not going to play it because I don't want to waste time on this. But Carney does actually have a really good defense on this, which will happen later. If you care about the debate and you care about this, you can go watch his defense. He does actually parry this attack really well, but this is one of Gould's good attacks, and this is another one following up here. This is another one against Carney, and it happens around 30 minutes into the debate.
Artificial intelligence, last point, because a lot of people want to come in.
Yep.
We need to leverage all of our assets from critical minerals to clean energy and well beyond to harden those partnerships in Europe and in Asia with like-minded.
Ms. Gould.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you to my colleagues, I think, for some very interesting ideas. Mark, you talked about reaching NATO targets, but of all of us on stage, you plan to reach those not until 2030, but the imperative to do that is now. You talked about the fact that the Arctic is under threat. We don't have time to wait for this. We have to actually make sure that we are investing here in Canada, reaching those targets, because our country, our sovereignty is under threat, and we are in a new world. And so the time to make those investments is now.
I do have a question.
So this one's a similar vibe. This is another good attack because it's, again, hitting Carney on policy. It's hitting him on a specific thing that voters who are voting are going to be considering. They're going to have a conversation about this. They're going to be discussing this. And that's the goal you have when you have a debate attack. The point is that the someone who's undecided is going to look at this and be like, oh, that's a good point. I need to consider this. Now, it's not memorable, but it is an important. Attacks are important. That's how you win. And actually, as I go on to this segment a bit, you'll find that none of the other Liberal leadership candidates really land any good hits here. But again, we have yet another one from Gould here. This one's quite interesting. It's more of a backhanded blow. It's a little subtle if you're not really paying attention to it, but I was. And, well, here you go. This is again against Carney. She's
And it's
really
creating one Canadian economy instead of 13. That's what's necessary to move this country forward from where we are today, which has become quite a weak position economically.
We will dig into some of those topics a bit more. Ms. Gould, you're up next.
Thanks. Thanks, Hannah. I think your question was actually about the cost of living for Canadians. It wasn't about, the macroeconomic picture, which we know is doing okay for Canada. But when Canadians, people, don't feel like that, it's not working for them. I'm glad to hear, my colleague talk about housing. It's one of the first times I've heard him talk about it during this campaign. I put out a very bold, ambitious plan on housing that would eliminate homelessness, that would build...
So yeah, very subtle there, but she kind of backhands Carney by saying he's never talked about housing before. So it is a nice, clever, small little thing. And one of the reasons why I say she has a decent oration on this is she manages to avoid getting bogged down in these kind of attacks, but... well, that's the thing. And just in the comments there, the Fixer, yeah, this is not really much of a debate. The only person on this debate stage who came here to debate was Gould, which is why she has a B. The other three were not really there to debate. They were just pontificating. They might as well just have done a speech. And then finally, I believe this is the last attack I have from Gould. Gould does more attacks than the ones I'm illustrating here, by the way, but a lot of them either don't land or are pointless. Like, Gould and Freeland do a lot of attacks, especially in the second half against Poilievre, which is completely pointless because this is not a debate with Poilievre. This is a debate among other Liberals, so attacking someone who's not on the stage is just a waste of your time. Don't even bother doing it. Aha! I'm a Liberal. I don't like the Conservative. Well, all the Liberals don't like the Conservatives. Like, that's nothing. It doesn't tell you anything. But here is Gould's final attack that I think is actually, good.
Place government programs that are going to help the economy work, government programs that are going to be à la bénéfice, to the benefit of businesses, and take away ones that are hurting, such as, for example, I wrote well over a year ago that the increase in capital gains was a very bad idea because it goes against what we want. It discourages investments when we want to encourage them.
Ms. Gould, you're up next.
Thank you, Hannah. Look, I'm all for increasing productivity. And in fact, last week, I announced a plan to create 1 million new entrepreneurs in this country. I'm the daughter of a small business owner. I grew up working in the family business, and I think we need to unleash that economic potential. But if someone tells you that they're going to balance the books in a very short period of time, increasing our productivity in that period of time is not going to be sufficient. And at a time when we are facing potentially one of the greatest economic shocks our country has experienced, we need to ensure that the government can be there for Canadians, like the federal government was during the pandemic with the Canada Emergency Response benefit, the business loan, as well as the wage subsidy, because we will win against Donald Trump. But we need to ensure that Canadians have the income support.
So I'm going to cut it off there. You can, again, watch the whole debate if you care about that. But what this makes this attack quite good here for Gould is she basically, this is definitely a canned thing, by the way. This was 100% scripted. And by that I mean, like, I don't mean like, oh, the Liberals scripted their debate. I mean, like, her team, Gould's team, knew Bayliss or Carney or someone was going to have a line about balancing the budgets by increasing productivity. So she already had a pre-planned attack on that. And it just so happens that Bayliss is the one who she used the line on. But just because it's pre-planned doesn't mean it doesn't hit. It hits quite well. It's a very good attack. You're going to talk about balancing the budgets but not reducing spending. Like, that's really not a thing you can meaningfully do. And she is actually correct on that point. That's where we get off with Gould. So those are her big moments for the debate. Big hits. She has no moments. Nothing in this debate is memorable. You will not... If you watch this debate, you probably forgot everything I just listed here. But when you're talking about, like, the technical skill here, that is why she is A-level for blows. She has a lot of very good hits. But she has no moment, so only a B overall. Next, we have Frank Bayliss. Bayliss stayed on message, C. He has no moments. He sort of has a blow, but it's not a really good blow. And he's a passable orator. He's comfortable and articulate, but he's just boring. There's nothing interesting about his speech. You could honestly fall asleep. But this is his one attack that I think that was of interest here.
And then I was not a minister, so I've not been a minister with Mr. Trudeau's government, nor have I been an economic advisor. Where I will differentiate myself greatly is that I'll be focused much more on the economy. I'll be focused on creating wealth. I'll be focused on getting more money into Canadians' pockets. That's what I'm good at. I'm also going to look at building an innovation-based economy. So I really wanted to do that. That's going to be my main focus. You need both when you're in government. You need wealth creation and you need wealth redistribution. We've done a lot of wealth redistribution to the point that we're renouncing programs we can't even pay for. And we're letting programs such as healthcare fall apart. So what I want to do is get back in there. I'm a big supporter of these programs, so I want to make sure we have the funds to pay for them. That's going to be where I'm going to be much different from the previous government.
Okay.
So that is a blink and you miss it attack as well, because Bayliss's whole problem this entire debate is he's flat, he's monotone, he's articulate, but there's just no energy behind it. There's no interest behind it. There's no changing in his inflection of his voice. So there's not really any way to capture your attention that he's actually attacking someone there and he's not just saying the same line again. But if you do pay attention and you did listen to that line, which most people probably didn't, it is actually a pretty good attack. And it's a good attack because he's attacking the people indirectly. He's attacking Freeland and Gould, who are much more involved in the Trudeau government. He's also attacking Carney, who is working as Trudeau's economic advisor, and saying, I'm the only one who's different. Look at these guys. They're all worked with those guys, and they all failed. But this doesn't bump him up from a C grade because there's no interest behind it. It's a blink and you miss it because there's no emotion, there's no interest. And that's really where he falls flat here. Next, we have Carney. Now, to go back to the rubric, Carney, once again, stayed on message. Huzzah! He didn't really fumble. He almost fumbles at a couple points. He gets tongue-tied a lot. And he likes being really obfuscatory with his speech. But overall, doesn't actually fumble, but he's close to it. He has no good moments. He doesn't land any blows. He does a lot of attacks, but none of them actually land at all. Or they're kind of pointless. Like, I'm going to show one here that would even be a bad attack if Poiliev was on stage. And his oration is not great. I would even suggest, like, he's definitely not D category, but he's not passable. I'm giving him a C minus to a D plus in oration, and the rest of it is a C, so he has a C minus overall. Because his oration, like I said, he gets tongue-tied, he sounds bored, he's monotone, he's flat, he likes being really obfuscatory with his speech, like he's really puts too many words, too wordy. It's not great. But when he gets on economics, he's a lot better, but the debate isn't just about economics. There's all other things involved. But let's watch this one clip.
Be fully briefed on these issues. Pierre Poilievre hasn't ever bothered to get his security clearance. I've already, during this leadership campaign, filled out my forms. It wasn't that hard to do, I have to say, and put them in, and I fully expect to get it in the near future. This is the kind of irresponsibility at a time when our country is under threat that we cannot afford. We cannot afford.
So you get the gist there. Like, the reason why this doesn't land very well is, first off, this is a very tired line. It's very, very, very long. Like, this has been used for years now. This is not a new point. This is just recycling an attack that's been going on for like 3 years. So not great. He gets tongue-tied in his own attack. It's clearly rehearsed, which is not great. And again, there's no emotion, there's no inflection change, there's no energy behind it. So it doesn't land very well. And also, Poilievre's not on the stage. No one who's voting in the Liberal leadership race is going to vote for Poilievre unless they're, like, trolling the Liberals, if that makes sense. But outside of people who got a Liberal membership to troll the Liberal Party, no one who's voting genuinely in this leadership race plans on voting Poilievre. So attacking Poilievre is just a waste of time. It just doesn't work. And now finally, we're going to go touch on Freeland here. So Freeland, again, stays on message. Again, she has no fumbles. She has some attacks, but for the most part, she's almost exclusively attacking Poilievre or Trump. Which, again, doesn't really tell you anything. It doesn't really do anything. He's not on the stage. Why does that matter? Now, this is a first here. I will be very clear. I find Freeland, in most circumstances, really annoying to listen to. But her debate prep team must have done a really good job, because I found most of her worst traits when public speaking were not out here. She was still self-righteous, which is not good. It's never going to be self-righteous. And she still loved wasting her time speaking. But her rhetoric and her articulation was actually quite good for once. And the use of anecdotes, even though some of them felt probably fake, are a plus. Now, she is pulled back when it sounds like she's lecturing the audience, that this is a professor lecturing to the students, that she's clearly has an air of superiority and she's preaching. But overall, this is probably the best oration I've seen Freeland give. So I'll give her like a C plus on oration, and she has a lot of attacks. None of them really land because she's attacking the wrong people. She's attacking people who are not on the stage. So overall, Freeland gets a C plus. But again, I'll play one of her attacks for you here just to illustrate what I mean. So this one, again, she's attacking Poilievre.
early learning and childcare. And it was wonderful to work first with Ahmed Hussein, get that first crucial deal with BC and a bunch more. And then Ahmed handed the baton to Karina, and we worked together. This is generational. It's transformational for Canada. My affordability plan includes 100,000 more childcare places. It includes a middle-class tax cut. It includes a cut on credit card fees. It includes a cut on taxes for first-time home buyers. And the critical thing for us to all remember is the real threat to Canadian families, the real threat to people working really hard and struggling to get by is not anyone on this stage. It is Pierre Poilievre. He will cut, cut, cut. He will bring in a cruel austerity that will hurt all the people in Canada who need the help the most. And that's why I'm proud to be a Liberal, and that's why I'm running.
So, like, in this attack here, her rhetoric is good. Her articulation is good. Her emotion captured is good. This would otherwise be a good attack. But she's attacking someone who's not on the stage. She's attacking someone who doesn't matter for this debate. So it's just pointless. But it's actually a well-executed attack against someone who's not here. So that's why she has a C+. If she used this energy to attack Carney or Gould or Bayless, she probably would have done better. But she spent all of this somehow like Freeland 2.0 rhetoric skills to attack people who were not on the stage. Which is just pointless. So overall, we have a B for Gould, a C for Bayless, a C- for Carney, and a C+ for Freeland. And just to remind everyone what how my rubric works, you get a C if you just show up. As long as you did your job, you get a C. You get worse if you do bad, higher if you do better. I'm a harsh marker. We have high standards here. But remember, C's get degrees. Yeah. Overall, though, on this debate, just two things I'd like to note on just the overall structure of it and how it's ended up being in practice. So the first one about the debate overall is they spent way too much time in the first half talking about Trump. I understand why they wanted to devote a quarter of the debate to talking about Trump, but after about 10 minutes, they were just repeating themselves over and over and over again. So by minute 30, there had been 20 minutes of them just reiterating their own positions. It would have been better to use that doing anything else. And the other thing, too, is as someone mentioned earlier in the chat, there really was a lot of nothing in this debate. There was a lot of people weren't really debating each other. They weren't really attacking each other. They weren't really there. They were just being friends. They were hugging each other on stage. They were all, I agree. But a lot of inter-party debates end up being like that, so it is kind of what it is. But that stated, let us go on to the questions section. So for anyone who has joined the chat and is not used to how my streams here work, I will be answering all good questions asked here. I've not gotten a bad question before, but maybe someone will have a one-day bad question. I am going to prioritize supers and previous member chats, and I'm going to do reverse chronological. Then I will go into everyone else's. So we'll start off with an old super I had, and then I'll go into this new super that just popped up. And thank you, CanPiv09, for the super. I will answer your question momentarily, but the rules are the rules. Here we go. Let's zoom in a bit so people can actually read this. So this is from Mad Beast Yeti. Do you take into consideration bilingualism for your debate grading, especially in Canada? English debates, French debates, bilingual debates, viewers versus speaker's perspective, listening to translations versus actual understanding. And how I've been grading them, I don't tend to take this into account. And that's not because I don't think that's important. It really is. I don't speak very good French. I'm learning, but my French is bad. So I can't really assess the impact there. There is obviously going to be an impact. Like, if you do really bad in the French debate, that's going to affect you more in Quebec than it's going to affect you in Ontario. Vice versa in the English debate. Or in a bilingual debate, maybe it'll affect both equally. But it's a lot harder to grade it that way. And that kind of falls a little... If I was good at French, I would be grading the skill at speaking in French, but I'm not. I do grade your skill at speaking in English. Now, this hasn't been an issue because the only Quebecois leader who matters on the national scale right now, Blanchette, has really good English, so it doesn't matter. But if it did matter, I would grade it that way. If I spoke French in a good enough fashion that I felt comfortable critiquing someone else's French, I would also grade them off that skill for a French debate. But I don't want to be the guy who barely knows how to speak French saying, hey, your French is bad. It feels disingenuous. Going into the recent just popped up super chat, though, I guess I will just... Well, I'll just read it out. So this is from CanPiv09 Q&A. Assuming you wanted the party to win, what's one thing you would change about each federal party to make them more electable? Ooh, okay, that's a big question. So I'll start with the easiest to hardest. For the easiest one, for the Conservatives, I would really just... I think they mostly need to do the same thing, but the main thing is, I think, at this stage, especially with all the Liberal leadership candidates except Gould abandoning the carbon tax, is de-emphasize it. Don't abandon the topic, but don't make it the number one speaking issue anymore. Try to pick something else as the main wedge you're going at. It's just not as effective anymore. And as long as the Conservatives pivot to a more effective wedge, I think they will continue to... They'll probably end up winning anyways. For the Liberals, this is easy in the sense that it's almost impossible for them to win right now. It's not entirely impossible. Like, don't get me wrong. The Liberals could win an election. But the trick here is it's really hard for them to win on purpose, which is the difference. Like, if Poilievre screws up or Trump does enough things to really scare Canadians and they decide that the Liberals are the correct party to go for to assuage that fear, they can absolutely win. However, once you start saying, what can the Liberals do of their own accord to win, it gets really hard to see. And that's really because they don't have time. If you were to put me in charge of Liberal campaigning back in 2023, I think it would have been quite easy. 2022 even easier. And if the thing you do in 2022, 2023 to make the Liberal Party win is you don't have the immigration wave. If they kept 2019 level immigration coming in, it wouldn't have been, or even better, they actually reduced immigration from 2019 levels. They would have likely have done better. In fact, they'd probably be in a really strong position. It's really not captured here because Poilievre is not pro-immigration. He's not very anti-immigration, if that makes sense. He's like immigration neutralist. Immigration neutral. But it's one of the biggest things I've seen on the doorstep is immigration. People are really unhappy with it. And if that was removed, I think it would be causing a lot of the problems that the Liberals are experiencing to be better. But now, as of 2025, they don't really have the time to do anything be like that. The NDP, they're also quite interesting. They're kind of easy, but also kind of hard. They have the time. There's the problem of obviously time here as well. They don't have a lot of time. But the main thing I would do if I was an NDP leader, the number one thing is abandon pushing social liberalism entirely. I'm not saying the NDP has to be socially conservative, but social liberalism should not be the NDP's raison d'etre. The NDP's purpose as a party, what gets them votes, is being economically left-wing. That doesn't mean they have to be like communists, but being economically left is why people vote NDP. People do not vote NDP because it's socially liberal. I don't actually have it queued up here, but I could bring up my favorite chart about where people sit in the Canadian political spectrum, and it will make perfect sense. 1 second here. Wow, look, we brought it back. My favorite chart. So, most Canadians are economically center-left or left. Most Canadians are socially conservative. So the NDP, what they really want to do, if they want to do well, the NDP wants to be a strong party. The NDP wants to be over here or over here. In reality, the NDP under Singh is over here. So they need to go right there, and they will be in a position where they can win. The Manitoba NDP is right here. The Alberta NDP is right here, which is why they lose. The BC NDP is also right here, but the BC is more left-wing, so they can pull that away. Saskatchewan NDP is probably closer to over here, like straddling these two spears. And they have to be that way because Saskatchewan's just more conservative. So the Western NDP, even the most left-wing Western NDP, is more right-wing on social issues than the federal party. So if they just move to the right on social issues, and that doesn't even necessarily mean they have to suddenly be, we're going to ban abortions. But just stop talking about it. And they'll do better. And that also means probably don't do it when you're in government, too. That's not a successful policy. For the Greens have a hard time. Because the Greens kind of need both the Liberals and the NDP to collapse. But assuming you play everything flawlessly, I think the Greens kind of have to do the same strategy as the NDP. I think the social liberalism is really holding them back because, once again, as per the chart, most Canadians are not socially liberal. And a lot of times people get confused on this. They'll see a poll from like Research Co. and be like, most Canadians support abortion or something like that. And they think, people are socially liberal. It's like, well, do you see the politicians campaigning to ban abortion? If they were, there would be a lot of people who would support them. Voters reflect the views given to them, expressed by elites to an extent. Like, obviously people can have their own views, but if elites also support that view, people will support that too. Like, a lot of people just support what society supports, so if society decided to support a socially conservative position, they would support that too. So, anyways, I digress, but that's a really big issue there. The Bloc, they can't win a federal election because they won't run in an Anglophone riding. But to do better, honestly, I think they're just doing fine. I don't really think there's any big issues with them. Without abandoning separatism, there's really no way to do better. Separatism will hold them back, but separatism is the only reason the Bloc exists. So, I think the Bloc's doing about as good as it can do. And then the PPC. The PPC's problem is Bernier. It's Bernier. 100%. It's Bernier. The PPC's platform, their economics, it's a little libertarian for Canadians, but the social positions could probably make up for it if their leader was better. I'm going to do a video about this some point in the future about like the characteristics of leaders and how that affects things. But Bernier really falls into a bunch of problems that are not good for a leader, that you don't want in a leader. He's really foppish. He's really self-aggrandizing. He's very prideful. And he's like kind of out of touch, but not in a good way. Like there's a good aloof and there's like out of touch. Those are not the same. Being aloof is good. Being out of touch is bad. So it's not. And there's also a sincerity problem with Bernier where people don't really believe him. So again, I would replace Bernier as leader if that was. I think if the PPC ended up taking in, probably their ideal leader in my mind would probably be like a trying to think here, slightly socially conservative, fiscal conservative guy who is a big the scion of a big landowner, so kind of an aristocrat who is very charismatic. If they found that guy, they'd probably do really well. So kind of in a sense, if they had an anti-Trudeau, they would do really well. But Bernier's not going to do that well. And I believe that's all the federal parties that matter. I'm assuming you don't want me to go through all the fringe parties that get like 10,000 votes. So here we will go into the next question I have. This is a member question. And we'll zoom out a touch here. Okay, this is from GLJ Rocco 97. What is your opinion on the future of war? Meaning, we are seeing how technology is becoming more behind a screen than on a battlefield. Could we see the world having more wars because people will be more willing to have them because soldiers will be behind a screen than the battlefield getting killed? Also, big military industries will also be incredibly happy because countries will pay more for weapons to fight wars. Will this create a war being a normal thing in your daily lives? Thereby, over time, will humanity affect the cost of war and create weapons, etc., etc.? Sorry for making this a very dark question. I just wanted to know your opinion on this when you authored the article on a modern-day battleship usage on Substack. Great Substack article. I recommend it. So, to get at, I'm going to break this into 3 parts. So the first part is we're 100% going to see more wars. And we're going to see more wars not strictly because of technology, not because the soldiers are dying. More people will die, 100%. But we're going to see more wars because... We'll abstract this a bit. Make it more lower level. Things in life, if you go to a high crime neighborhood, that neighborhood's usually very high crime because there is no gangs in it. There's no police in it. So there's no central authority organizing things. The less central authority is, the higher the crime rate is, the more violent a community is. As soon as you start centralizing it behind a cartel or a mafia group, or the police will crack down the crime. Soon as you have an authority like that in place, crime usually plummets. And it plummets because it's not in the interest of the authority for that to happen. The reason why we saw so little war for most of my viewers' lives, because I see the statistics, almost all of you are under the age of 40. None of you will have seen much war in your lives because we had a time period when we had the Soviet Union and the US, and then the Soviet Union died. So we had 2 factions into a brief period of hegemony. And it's not in the interest of the Soviet Union and the US to fight each other. And it's not in the interest of the US to have wars when they're the hegemon. But today, in the year of our Lord 2025, the US is not a hegemon. They haven't been hegemonic for a long time. A lot of people are really confused what Trump is doing, why he's giving up US hegemony. The US hasn't had hegemony for a very long time. And there's lots of reasons for that, but the biggest reason is the US chronically overplayed its hand in that they woefully underfunded their military to maintain hegemony status. But also they introduced a really silly foreign policy. They had a very so there's lots of schools of foreign policy here, one of which is the liberal school of foreign policy. This is not strictly the same thing as political liberalism, but the liberal school of foreign policy is basically like, we should try to have a foreign policy to spread liberalism. It's related, but not quite the same thing. It's like a moralist foreign policy, whereas realism is obviously not a moralist foreign policy. It's very amoral. It's a pure power dynamic of how you govern things. And the US's foreign policy, this liberal foreign policy school, combined with their chronic underfunding of the military, really alienated a bunch of countries who created another bloc, which is the Russia, Iran, China, North Korea bloc. Yeah, you can say individually none of them are very strong, but when you have a critical mass of countries that form a bloc like that, you actually have a really hard time enforcing power onto them. And then you combine that with the chronic underfunding of the US military for like 30 years after the Cold War. And you get into a situation where the US doesn't actually really have the power to fight two countries at the same time. They can't fight China and Russia at the same time. And it's really debatable if the US can actually fight Russia. I'll caveat this. If the US and Russia fought a hot war in 2025, the US would win because Russia's expended a lot of its strength in Ukraine. But in 2022, it's really debatable if that war would have went very well. Not because the US is weaker than Russia, but because the US, as time and again has shown in Vietnam, Korea, Afghanistan, even World War II, they really do not have a stomach for casualties. So it's really hard to be a hegemon, chronically underfunding your military, and also not wanting to bleed. It's very, very difficult to do that. But to get on the main gist of your question here, on the future of war, I think we're going to basically see more of the same. I think we've kind of hit a technology plateau. I'm one of the biggest drone bears in the world. I'm not saying drones are going to go away, but drones are not a game-changing weapon. They kind of caught Russia off guard. They caught Ukraine off guard. They've worked well in third world wars, like in the Syrian civil war and stuff like that, and the Libyan civil war. But the big issue with drones is they actually are really easy to counter. It's just we did not have the actual weapon systems on field to counter them. You counter them with electronic countermeasures, jamming, spoofing, that kind of stuff. And you counter them with air burst autocannons. We invented proximity fuses 80 years ago. You just put proximity fuses on 30 millimeter cannon rounds fired out of an autocannon, and you'll shoot down lots of them. Now, Russia doesn't have those, so drones are being quite effective against them. But as soon as those weapons are deployable on the front line, you're going to see drones become a lot less significant. They're not going to go away. Just like tanks don't go away because we have things like RPGs and javelins. But they're not going to be a wonder weapon. If you assume that a wonder weapon is going to win you a war, you are wrong. You might have a good weapon, but it's not going to be the be-all, end-all of something. So wars are going to be kind of the same, but also not. It's probably going to be a lot of trench warfare, though, because our ability to kill weapons or kill people is way higher than our ability to not get killed right now. So I would assume any modern war is going to be very trenchy. But that is overall answer to the question there. And that's, we're going to move on to the questions from people in reverse chronological order for just regular questions. 1 second here while I get my screen switched. Okie dokie. We have the screen switched here. I will zoom back in. So this is from Iron Guy GM6VF. Whew. Is there any possibility that Pierre can still win after the tariffs and a new leader? He put all his bags in the carbon tax and Trudeau, now those issues are gone. Yes. The short answer is yes. The long answer is the Conservatives have a very strong position here. Carney is, or whoever wins the leadership race for the Liberals for that record, because Trudeau himself is polling better than he did in December. Anyone who comes out of the Liberal leadership race is going to be polling better than December. And the tariff threats and all that stuff has really scared a lot of like the promiscuous progressives back to Liberals. Some of the Liberal conservative defectors might be coming back to the Liberal Party because they just didn't like Trudeau or something like that. Maybe they really like Carney now, or maybe they really like Freeland and she'll be the leader. 100%. They'll make it closer. But the thing here is, especially as more time goes on, a new leader doesn't fix a lot of the core issues of the Liberal Party. They don't have a lot of time to fix it. And I think a lot of polls right now are not maliciously and not intentionally overestimating the Liberals. And this is because conservative turnout voter response is suppressed. They're demoralized because the polls and the Liberals are rebounding. And the Liberals are boosted because they're doing really well in the polls. And they feel really excited because of a new leader. But those two things will level off sometime in March, which is why I'm putting off a video, because I think things will level off mid-March, unless an election's called by then. And we'll get a better picture of what's going on. And I think once things level off, the Conservatives will still have a firm lead. My polling, for the record, in Ontario provincially, still has the Conservatives with a very good lead. The Liberals have gained ground, obviously, but they still have a good lead. So I'm feeling good about it. I think Poilievre still has a good should win. We have next question from Baron Devmont. Can Bloc and the CPC make a push into Montreal/Laval? Well, probably not anymore. Probably not anymore. Maybe in the long term, if the Liberals crash down or they wait until like October, they could probably do it, but not now. Not the Liberals have to be polling in the low 20s for places like Montreal and Laval to really be in play. And if they're polling in the high 20s, low 30s, like they're just not in position. Next question here coming from Redcoat4348. You said in the past you're opposed to proportional representation because you are against coalitions and favor big tent parties that have a broad geographic base of support. Could you get the best of both worlds with a low district magnitude PR with 3 to 5 seats per district? Less fragmentation and geographic spread still matters. Also, you don't favor it in Canada. Are there any countries where you think PR is a better choice for their electoral system than Canada? Or than first past the post, sorry. I think on the provincial level, Quebec would do good considering it's like a 5-party system in a trench coat. So to answer your last question first, I actually don't think Quebec's a 5-party system. I think it is a 3-party system. And you could say, 3-party system should be better for PR, but I don't think that would change much. Which again, to the second part of my question here. So you are correct in that I don't really like coalitions, and I do favor big tent parties. But my main opposition to PR is more that I don't think it's a worthwhile effort to change. I don't think PR per se will make your elections worse or will give you worse results, but I also don't think it will make you better. I'm of the opinion that voters will vote as long as they understand their voting system, they will vote in a way that guarantees them the result they wanted. So if you had proportional representation in Ontario's election that just happened yesterday, Doug Ford is still premier. Maybe there's like a really squishy business liberal party that's in a coalition with the PCs. And maybe the PCs are in a coalition with a stronger New Blue as well. So you have like the New Blues, the PCs, and the business liberals in a coalition. But Doug Ford's still premier. And the policies overall are going to be very much the same. Because the way I view how politics works is, at the end of the day, the person at the top, the premier, the prime minister, they matter a lot more than the ministers. Yeah, a really good minister can have a lot of impact. But the really good minister in the business liberals is probably just going to run for the PC party right now. The really good minister in the New Blues is probably just going to run for the PC party right now. So you're probably not losing that much in the scheme of good ministers. Like maybe the odd one, but I don't think it'd be a really big difference. Now, that all said, I do think your proposal, the low district magnitude PR, is probably the best version of PR. Now, personally, if I were to change to a system, I kind of like STV more. It's complicated, but I like it more than party lists. I really do not like party lists at all. I don't like the power that gives parties over their candidates, over the people running for them. That part I really don't like, but other than that, I think, yeah, there's nothing wrong with PR. I just don't think it really does anything better for it, for a system. Then we have another question from Mad Beast Yeti. What's your thoughts on digital minimalism, dumb phones, and decentralizing your tech from smartphones? So I'm, like many people of my age, use my phone almost compulsively. It's actually, I would like to get away from it, but a lot of things, right, you have problems with phones. So many things depend on them, like your email's on your phone, your socials are on your phone, you need to use your socials, you need to use your email, your calendar's on your phone. Like, there's a lot of things to it. But I do think trying to minimize your screen time is definitely the correct choice, and especially trying to minimize smartphones. I think it's really bad for your attention span if every time you're bored, you pull up your phone and start using it. I'm a hypocrite because I do that, but I don't think it's good for you. It's kind of like, oh, you're bored, so you can do a line of cocaine. Like, yeah, you're no longer bored, but that's not good. You shouldn't be doing that. So, I do think you should minimize your tech use. At least to the degree that you can get away with it. So, like, do things in person with your friends. Spend time with your family. Like, things like that. Go outside, exercise. Like, those things are better than screen time. In my opinion, your screen time is, like, the last choice. Or if you're going to do a screen time, like, watch a movie or a TV show with friends or family. So it's not the same thing. But your single-player video game really should be, like, the last thing you're doing, in my 2 cents, as someone who likes playing single-player video games. But that should be, like, the last option of the menu, what you're going to do today. Same with scrolling, like, Twitter. That should be, like, the last thing you do. Now, it's not the last thing I do, but it should be. And then we have here from... Ooh. Okay. Perez Alex Witt. Could you give a perfect example of a politician or world leader within each grade within your rubric, whether they're American, Canadian, or otherwise historically or contemporary? Also, since being a good orator is only good for debates, is it all that impactful to the overall campaign? Clips would be nice for context. In my opinion, as many people don't watch the debates and only see highlights. So I'm not going to answer the first question, per se, because I'm not going to go through the history of every single debate. That's way too much effort. There's certainly people who are really good orators or have really good moments. Like, again, the moment back in, what is it, the 1984 debate when Brian Maloney says, "You had a choice." Like, that's an A plus moment. Like, that's still said today. People still talk about that. Or, this wasn't in a debate, but another good example of like an A plus moment is like when JD Vance is talking to some reporter named Margaret about immigration, and he's like, "I really don't care, Margaret." Like, that's an A plus. That's so memorable. Like that kind of thing. And like rhetoric, I mean, you can like look at GLJ Rock was correct in the chat. Like, people like Churchill or like Lincoln have really good rhetoric. So like those are some good examples there. But the main part of your question here is since being a good orator is only good for debates, is it impactful to the overall campaign? So I'll just clarify here. It's primarily good in debates. Being really good orator is actually quite good if you're doing rallies, if you're doing speeches. Now, it matters more depending on what side of the political aisle you are on, because rallies and speeches resonate more with right-wingers than they do with left-wingers. It's because of how right-wing versus left-wing organization works. Right-wingers are more hierarchical, so they have to actually have buy-in to follow you, whereas left-wingers more need to be on, think that they have decision choice. So since they're not following the leader per se, they are, the left-wingers are like agreeing and working with the leader. They prefer more like town halls kind of thing, or more like one-on-one discussion, or maybe group discussion. Whereas right-wingers like strong authority figures, so they like seeing a rally, they like seeing a speech. It speaks to them better. And if you're doing rallies, if you're doing speeches, being a good orator is really good. Rhetoric and your skills are really important in that moment. Now, I have one last question from the overall chat right now. If anyone has any other questions they want before I finish up here, I mean, by all means, you should go put it in the chat before I finish this next question. But assuming no one else does this, this is my last question here. So, this is from GLJ Rocco 97. You think Trump could survive his own term with all his tariffs, or will it hurt him in the midterms? So that's a good question. It's hard to say. I think it's really too early to tell. Like, if there's some inklings right now the U.S. economy is not liking the uncertainty with the tariffs, and if that becomes the problem, the uncertainty hurts the economy, that might not go well in the midterms. But outside of the concerns about uncertainty, the concerns about the exact policy, I don't think it matters that much. Especially if Trump actually pulls off the rest of his economic policies, if he does do tax cuts, if he does do a lot of these other things. If the economy overall does well. Voters don't really care about particular issues. They're not being like, you did tariffs, it's bad. They care about the general trend. Like, there are definitely people who will care about one social issue to the point where they will not vote for you anymore. But outside of social issues on the economy, it's more of a general vibe people care about. So it's too early to say, really. We might have a better idea by January 2026 what the economy looks like for Trump, what the wage growth looks like, what the inflation looks like, what the GDP looks like. If those numbers are good, he's probably going to do fine in the midterms. If they're bad, he's probably going to get roasted in the midterms. I wouldn't really put too much stake in the foreign policy stuff. I wouldn't put too much stake in the social policy, the specifics of the economic policy. It's really the kind of the macro, but also the personal level. What the average person sees, what they feel, what they experience. But with that, I don't think there's any other question. I'll just take a quick look up the chat here. But that appears to be it. So I will sign off here. Just remind everyone that over the next month of March, make sure you tag questions with Q&A or Q letter NA, and I'll be able to find them easily for next time. And if you want priority on your question, you could put it as a super chat, or you can sign up as a member for my channel. Members get a free priority question every month. And with that, I will be heading out. I will see you guys next week. I think I'm going to do the Ontario Postmortem next. But with that, sayonara.